Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
And I'm Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh.
You're still looking through your... What are you looking through? You're like looking through your mail.
I'm multitasking. Don't tell everybody that I'm not paying attention to the podcast. Don't do that. You outed me, dude. That's a very important document for everybody who needs to know. It's my list for my doctor's appointment next week. Thank you very much.
Okay. Just because I usually lead into our episodes doesn't mean you can't lead into our episodes. Doesn't mean you can just check out for the first couple minutes.
Well, just for everybody who's listening right now, Josh promised me he was only going to do one technical thing before the show started, and it was really three. So I started looking through my paperwork as I was being pleasantly professional and waiting for the technician to fix the technical problem. Guilty.
Yeah. All right, so today we're going to talk about Jean-Pierre Melville film. Have you seen any of his movies before?
No.
Okay. All right, well, today we're talking about Le Samourai, but I, a long time ago, watched, when you could get, you could go to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video or Movie Gallery, pick your poison, and it was $30 a month, and you could get a rental every day. I did that over the summer, one summer when I was in college, and I would rent a new movie every day and watch it. But back then I would just rent all these old movies, and I'm like, well, I wouldn't pay $5 to watch this back then. But it's oh yeah, I'll try this out. And I watched Le Cercle Rouge, but I don't think I was ready for it because I fell asleep. But I feel like I'm a little bit more prepared for this film and for Jean-Pierre Melville. So this is the first movie I've actually seen all the way through, is Le Samourai. First of all, this movie is one of the movies, it's kind of up there, and especially for directors, saying that they get a lot of inspiration from Melville in general and from this movie specifically, as far as the look of a movie or the feeling of a movie, or just kind of an ambiance and directorial choices. And I mean, performances too, but really it's kind of you're kind of putting people in place and moving them around like marionette dolls in some ways. That's the kind of feeling I got for this film. This seemed like a very directory film. And so, yeah, I was interested in watching Melville in general, but then this film specifically because it incorporated Alain Delon, who he did 3 movies with, this being his first. So how did you like it?
Okay, so this is how I sum it up. I used to work in a lot of restaurants. Go figure, actor working in restaurants. And they would tell you that you have to be here at 6 o'clock for the wine tasting. And somebody would come in and describe the wine and tell you about the tannins and the under oaky flavor and the butter flavor and all this other stuff. Now, I'm not a wine drinker. I'm not that much of a drinker. I've had some fun, but it's just not my thing. So I don't really have a taste for wine. So when I drink wine, it all tastes the same to me. But when I sat in those classes, and then they paired it with certain things. And then I have a friend who is a restaurateur up in New York. He no longer is. He owns his own bed and breakfast, but he used to be. And he paired all these wines with this dinner. And I'm not a big drinker with food because alcohol really goes right through me. And 2 drinks and I'm like, woo, dancing on the ceilings. So it kind of interrupts the food. But he kept saying, okay, just take a sip of this with this because you'll taste this, this, and this. So when my hand was being held through these wine classes, and through my friend's dinner, I understood what they were talking about. But I could not tell you, for the life of me, what made a wine good, what an aged wine tastes like. I need to be educated on why I'm enjoying this wine. And then when I have it in me to understand that it has an oaky flavor or smoky flavor or whatever it has, and it pairs well with seafood and rice and blah, 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 blah. When that's all being given to me, I can put it in my mind's eye. I taste that. I taste that. I get why that's accenting that flavors. This is what this movie's like. So I'm going to need a lot of help from you because I'm not really understanding what I'm supposed to be understanding in this film. I was halfway through it and I was like, is this me or what's happening here? I'm not gelling with this. It's not that I disliked it because I'm not the type of person who really dislikes movies. I like most everything I see and I could pull something out of most things that I see. I even watched the Power Rangers movie, the recent one.
The one with Elizabeth Banks?
I liked it. I mean,
Okay.
you know,
All right.
yeah, I liked it. It was on. I like superheroes. I like that kind of stuff. My nephews were super into that. I figured, what's the updated version look like? I like the colored costumes. Elizabeth Banks, I'm in, right? Because I had an obsession with her for a while.
Mm.
So that sounded creepy, but anybody who listens to the podcast knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, so I don't know if I liked it or didn't like it. I don't know what I'm supposed to think and feel about this movie. I just don't know. So I'm hoping that through this podcast, and I did some research, which I never do, and I did some reading of critical reviews and some stuff online, kind of went down a little rabbit hole. And I was reading stuff and I was like, oh, okay, so that's okay. I get that. I get that. I get that. The pacing is different than anything I'm used to. The acting is different than anything I'm used to. Stylistically, I immediately clicked into it. That gray room with that wave of cloud of smoke in the middle of it. You barely see that guy on the bed. Then he moves, and then the camera pulls back and wobbles a little bit, and then goes back in and comes back out. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I think it was a dolly zoom, like a Hitchcock, Vertigo,
Yeah, but
Jaws dolly zoom.
Yeah, but it goes in and then stops and juts back out really quick, and then it wobbles. And I was like,
think
okay, that means something. What is this?
No, I think it was a dolly zoom, like where it's dollying forward and kind of shaking, but then also zooming out to keep the windows in frame. We're talking about the very first shot of the film where they do the title sequence. And first of all, when I watched it, I was like, I didn't know this was a black and white movie. I thought it was a color film because I'd seen still frames from it in the past. But it's just that room was painted in that way. And it was just the feeling of the room was worn down and devoid of life, essentially, devoid of any kind of color or life. And then right in the center, of course, the only thing that's really moving during that whole shot is the bird it's like a bullfinch bird in a cage, and it's kind of moving around. And I mean, you can imagine, you can extrapolate out many kinds of meanings from that, something that is in a cage that is in this lifeless room. So that's the character at the beginning when we see him.
Yeah, but there is, from what my understanding is that everything has a purpose in a film, especially films that are revered and critically acclaimed and studied. And Kubrick, we can name a ton of them. Scorsese, there is nothing not purposeful, without purpose. Let's put it that way. So I feel like that had a purpose. I just don't know what the purpose is. So here's the bottom line for me. It goes back to that quote I've said a million times. We thought we had the answers. It was the questions we had wrong. I have a ton of questions about this movie. So I was intrigued, but I hate to say it, but I'm thinking if I was 15, 16, I would not have spent 10 minutes on this film.
Well, the first 10 minutes, there's no dialogue. So that's
right.
a big ask.
That's the first
right
thing
there.
I was going to say. That was actually a positive for me, because I realized about 3 minutes in, nobody said anything. And then I started clocking it. And it's literally 10 minutes before anybody says anything. And then it's insignificant. That's whatever said. And then it's nothing major. And then there's a whole nother 4 or 5 minutes without anybody saying anything. And it's like, okay, this is all with purpose, but I don't know what it is.
So, well, just really quickly, the plot is we're following the main character played by Alain Delon, and he's an assassin. He's a hitman, and he's paid money to kill the owner of the jazz club. And as he's leaving after he's done the job, the pianist for the jazz club sees him, and then he gets pulled in to a lineup later on because he's just one of the usual suspects, and the pianist doesn't finger him as the bad guy or as the guy who did the crime. And so the rest of the movie is him trying to get out of the trouble that he's in because of the people who hired him, and it's a gangster movie. But it's a French gangster movie, and it's a very stylized French gangster movie. So there's really not a lot of you could say that the plot is a little bit more complex than Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but it's not insane.
Is it? I'm being facetious. I guess.
I saw a lot of other movies in this movie. For example, Nicholas Winding Refn should be writing thank you notes to the family of Jean-Pierre Melville daily, because Drive has this feeling, and it just exudes that kind of style, that kind of quietude, and the fact that we're able to understand this character to the extent that we need to understand the character without the character talking. And there's a coolness. There's a look to each of those characters. There's a look to the driver. There's a look to Jeff Costello, the main character. Just the way that he puts on his hat and spends 30 seconds at the beginning of the film putting on his hat just right. I mean, there's a feeling.
Every time he puts on his hat.
That's true.
Because I clock that too. When he does the rim, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a feeling. So we've got heightened style. There's certain shots in the film that I saw Wes Anderson in this film. And there's a scene on the footbridge. We're not really giving anything away. There's a scene on the footbridge between two people, and it's a quick dialogue scene, but both characters are centered in the frame, looking directly at the lens, and it's a Royal Tenenbaums dialogue scene, back and forth, and so I saw that. So I don't know. I mean, and there's obviously a bunch of beautiful people in the film.
Good Lord. Don't even get me started.
It's an embarrassment of riches. So
for real, starting with the lead actor, Elaine Delon. He's amazing.
And his wife, it was her first role as his mistress. And then he immediately divorced her. I'm sure that's
in real life.
Yeah, in real life. Her name is Natalie Delon. But yeah, and she played his alibi essentially in the film. So yeah, but she's beautiful too. And the piano player is amazingly beautiful. The coat check girl,
beautiful. But Elaine Delon's eyes are, you just look at him and go, movie star. You're captivated just by the symmetry of his face. And the irony is he doesn't do much with his face in this film, which is really counterintuitive to somebody who is that good looking. You expect them to be much more expressive, but the character calls for something else. So I think that's why he got the part, is that he is completely contradictive to what we're expecting this guy to look like. That said, we also have to go along his journey, fall in love with him to a degree, so we can follow this sociopath doing what he does, to the point where he's going to do things that are, he does things that are bad from the beginning, but he continuously uses people, he kills people, he does things that are not good. I have never seen an actor be so stealth but say so much. When he comes in at one point, and we just say spoilers from this point on, because I don't know if there are spoilers. Like, I think if you had described this whole movie to me, I might have not even remembered it while I was watching it, because there is something intriguing. It did captivate me, but I'm not sure why. I don't know if that's good or bad. But there's a scene where he comes in and the bird is freaking out. And I think most actors would have the instinct to turn and make it obvious that the bird is freaking out and walk right to the bird. He doesn't. He turns back, takes his hat off, places it on the thing, turns back and pauses again, and then walks towards the bird cage. It's very downplayed. And I like that kind of stuff, because we've been doing a lot of movies with very over the top performances recently. Black Widow, No Sudden Move, they have some performances in them. And it's also interesting to see somebody that you are not necessarily, I'm not saying you're physically attracted to them, but they're attractive, so your focus is on them the whole entire time, but you really don't want to be, because he's not a good guy. You don't want to be on his side. You want to judge him, and he has enough in his eyes, those beautiful eyes, to make you wonder what made him this way. The character development is not in the movie. It's in his eyes. And so, it's, what'd you say, embarrassment of riches? It is. And the production design in the 1960s and France, Paris at that time, beautiful. Like, if I could transport to that piano player's apartment.
Yeah.
That apartment is
With the
unbelievable.
double staircase, it's like, what?
And that small hallway. Yeah, I love that. I would
Yeah.
love to sleep underneath that. That long hallway, that's the entrance, that's kind of too small really for regular adults, but yet they still have to go through that smaller door, and it's all lined with art. Like, who spends time in there? It's intriguing. It brings something up in you.
Well, I think the Alain Delon is disarming as this character, and it also plants that in the viewer's mind that it's like, so why did the piano player played by Kathy Rosier, why did the piano player not point him out? And then he kind of starts to explain a little bit later on in the film, where he tries to noodle that out later on in the film. But initially you're kind of like, well, maybe she's just really attracted to him. She doesn't want to see him to go into jail or whatever. And just the fact that he shows up the next day after he's killed someone, and she knows he's killed someone, is like, hey, can I get in the car with you? She's like, meh, sure. I mean, just that fact, you're just kind of like, what is going on here? But it does make sense in the context of the film. So yeah, I think that all of that stuff kind of put together in the stew allows for this film to be a little bit more believable, even though the concept of the film on paper may not be believable. I will say this before we get into like super, super spoilish. Right now it's on HBO Max, it's on Criterion Channel. So it's accessible if you have either one of those streaming services, and it's definitely worth watching the first 10 minutes. Like, if you can't get through that first 10 minutes of no dialogue, then like, go with God, you're fine. But at the same time, if you can't get through it, like, there's some really cool little things that you may notice that other directors use in other films. So, but I will say this, that I don't necessarily listen to the words of a song. I listen to the feeling of the song, the rhythm, the chord structure, the harmonization of either the singers, how the instruments interplay with each other. And that's how I kind of evaluate whether I like the song or don't. And what the song is saying, what the people are saying in the song that are singing, it's like pretty low actually on the totem pole for me. So I think that a film like this, the plot may be a little bit more complicated, or maybe not all get put together perfectly, but at the same time, I'm seeing so much on screen that I'm interested in and thinking about, and tying into other movies that I've seen, and where this movie sat in film history. It's enough to get me through. It's enough to keep me engaged, and it keeps me waiting for what's around the next turn. So I liked it.
And I will say this, if anybody's afraid of subtitles, because there seems to be an aversion to that with a lot of people, this is actually a film you might want to explore, because it's not heavy on the dialogue. So you don't have to, transpose it. You don't have to look at the subtitles and then figure out what's going on. It's very easy to follow it. You think about something like Parasite, you got to really pay attention and follow everything, because a lot is going on in that movie. This, I think you're right. I think that analogy of the song, or the lyrics of a song, is a good one. On the other hand, I will key into what people are saying, but I key into the emotion behind the words more than the words the first couple of times. And then many people who I've come to admire in the music industry, business world, the feeling when you click into the words, you go, oh, wow, that's what they're saying? Like, it holds up. It's not a throwaway. And I think this film falls underneath that category. It's just that I don't want to sound like the type of person who needs to be told why I'm supposed to like something, but I'm kind of that person. I kind of have to know why people admire this film. And you saying that people have, imitation is the highest form of flattery, have imitated it. And then when you said Wes Anderson, I said, oh yeah. And then I started thinking about Moonrise Kingdom and how he does do that. And he does do that facing the camera thing. And I'm like, oh yeah, so that's where that comes from. See, I don't know that, but that makes me admire this movie even more. Speaking of that, did you notice in the club when he was walking in and people were noticing? I think it's that scene. Mm-hmm. And then Like there were people in the club and people working at the club who all of a sudden just stopped what they were doing and looked dead in the camera and then went back to what they were doing. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I think it's putting breadcrumbs out for the people that get pulled in as witnesses later on when he kind of goes through and it's like, is this the guy? Is that the guy? And they only kind of key in on those people.
Side question. Why is it so unnerving when somebody looks dead in the camera? I see it all the time as mistakes and like it pulls your focus. You'll see an extra who just looks in the camera and it just happens. It's a big black box that flies by you in a crowd scene. You look right into it. You just do. And I can feel that person looking at me. What is it about it? Because they do that in Silence of the Lambs.
Did you look into the camera when you were on Independence Day?
No.
And you were right next to Judd Hirsch, right?
Well, no. Yes and no. No, during a break, he sat right down next to me and started talking to me.
Okay.
And I was like, you're one of those people I'm not supposed to talk to. And he was like, oh, no, it's okay. If I talk to you, it's okay. And I was like, oh, no, I need my $80 in my bag of M&Ms. No, I did not look right into the camera in any of the films that I did extra work on because the camera is always in a position that was either far away from me or behind me. And I positioned myself in Independence Day to get on camera. I moved behind the crowd and went to the side of the camera. So when the camera started pulling forward, I moved forward in that celebration when they come down from shooting the aliens down, they all come in, Bill Pullman sees his daughter and blah, blah, blah. You'll see the crowd, you'll see the camera rush in and over to the left-hand side. There I am. I mean, it's clear as day that it's me. I positioned myself. I was on the other side of the room and I said, you know what? I've been here for 3 days straight. How are they going to know? I'm in the same green shirt as everybody else. They're never going to know. And that's exactly what I did. I pulled around the side.
No.
Funny enough, when it goes to TV and they edit it to fit TV, I get cut out.
Oh no, because you're too far on the frame, on the edge of the frame.
Isn't it ironic? No. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
100%. Good times though.
No, that's really cool. Okay. So you brought up the fact that people get so unnerved when a character looks into the camera. And I have a theory on that. I could see people being unnerved by that or at least taken aback by that because we are entering into a contract with the film as we will be an observer. And when a character who you've been watching for the last 30 minutes at this point, and that character looks directly at you as the audience, that seems weird. But for example, if a character is watching television and somebody on the television is looking at the lens, it's not a big deal. I just watched the Ghostbusters Afterlife trailer and they have people watching YouTube videos of the original Ghostbusters ads, the TV ads, and they look directly into the camera. It didn't seem weird to me, but I know what you're talking about though, how that particular scene on the footbridge in Le Samurai was unnerving. It was kind of like, whoa, what's happening? Because that shot had not been established before. And for me, what it did was it immediately got me unsettled. And it wasn't even that many shots where they were each looking into the camera, but it was unsettled to the point where something's going to happen. Something's going wrong. This is not right. You need to kind of be on guard. And something did happen. He got shot.
The nightclub scene does happen before that, though. Those people in the crowd or the witnesses
looking into the camera.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because you're right. I did see that trailer for the new Ghostbusters 2, also TOO, and they do. You're right. They do talk to the camera, and people talk to the camera on TV all the time. All those local lawyers and car salesmen, they all talk to. Come on down.
The news.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Everybody talks to the camera.
Yeah. I never even thought about it that way. That's funny how it does seem different. I think in a movie, it's not traditional to do that. So you're not, maybe when you see the talking head on the news, you're just so used to that. If you're watching a situational comedy and they all break the fourth wall, that's a little unusual, but it's not unnerving. Maybe in films, it's unnerving because you're right, we've entered a contract and that's not usually part of the contract. I just think it's fascinating. I was not disturbed by it. I was perplexed by it. I was like, what does that mean? What does that mean?
Okay, so then spoilers from now on. I had another question for you as far as did the fact that you didn't have a backstory for the main character and the fact that the main character isn't giving you enough, isn't exuding emotions in the same way that a big time main character would in a film. Did that put you at a remove from the film? Did that prevent you from connecting with the film because the person who's on screen most of the time is not really engaging emotionally?
No, that's intriguing to me. I want to know why I don't know things about him. And I'm trying to find clues about him via his posture, his rhythm of walking, his way he puts his hat on. He obviously, and that hat is cool, and that coat is cool, and that style is cool, man. So I learned more about him through that. You know, Alain Delon is a very good looking guy, if I haven't already stated that 3 million times. It's not hard to be captivated by him because of his attractiveness. That said, it's counterintuitive to who he is as a character, which I think is quite brilliant. I keyed in on that. So no, I wasn't. You learn more about him through the way other people look at him and say about him. Oh, I'm just happy that you need me. His ex-wife, who plays his mistress, I guess, or a liaison. Yeah, what is she though? I mean,
well, he's not locking her down or anything. She's obviously able to
well,
do other things.
obviously. So, I mean, I don't know how they define their relationship, which is intriguing, which is character development for me. Knowing that she wants something from him that he doesn't want from her or is not involved in right now, and the fact that she has another man and he comes and goes and he uses her to as an alibi. The way he looks at the piano player when she first sees him, the way other people look at him, the way the bartender looked at him at the end, or whoever he is, that guy in the white coat. That guy was superb, by the way. Like, he had nothing to do in this film, and you know a lot about him. So, no, I don't think he's aloof. I just think he's a stone cold killer. And he physicalized that. So that to me was intriguing. I learned a lot by, okay, he had a love for his bird. He has that great look at the end where he turns around and he's like, ugh, bye, dude. You know, like, he loves that bird. He's an organized person, obviously, because his apartment is clean. It's not exactly new.
It's tidy, but it's
tidy.
not clean.
Well, it's just an old building, you know.
Yeah.
It's got character. It's like everything filmed in a New York Soho apartment where all the walls are crumbling, but yet they keep it that way because that's New York, or they paint over it because it's cool.
It's because they can't afford paint or anything else because they're spending all their money on rent.
That, and they're afraid to chip it off because it might be lead filled. Anyway, you know, the way his Evian bottles are on top of the cabinet where he keeps his coat, the wardrobe, I guess, the way that he keeps all of his supplies in his kitchen, that says what I need to know about him if they're not giving me, or the actor's not giving me anything else. I knew that was purposeful. I knew the way that he was locked down in his emotions was on purpose. So I started to figure out things by other ways, but he definitely has an intriguing way because he still has that kind of stealth, non-animated face at the end, but you know he's in trouble. You know he's worried, you know?
You know he knows what's going to happen, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So no, but I do want to jump to something at the beginning of the film before we get off the beginning of the film. Here's a question that I have. What is the deal with keys in France? Like, can you just buy a whole bunch of keys that fit a whole bunch of things and that you just have to take a chance? Because the people who broke into his apartment had them. He has them. The guy in the what's-a-majiggy chop shop, if you want to call it that, had them. Like, how does that work?
The cars that he stole were Citroen cars, which are, I mean, it's a French manufacturer, but they're only going to have so many keyways, like only so many types of keys. Especially back then, because I mean, it's not like nowadays you can probably put some sort of special code or something in your key fob for your car to where it's the only one that can actually work. Well, actually, my car, I have a little chip in the key to my car, and it's not even that new of a car. It's like 2010. And if the key hasn't been programmed to work with the car, it won't work. Like, my car won't turn on. Even if you go to Home Depot and cut a key, just like my key, it still won't work because the code within there. But back then they only had so many possibilities for locks for a manufacturer. So if you're building a car, if you're building that's a 1965 Citroen car, that model, then you're gonna only have like 10 different keys. I mean, that's
but I've had a lock changed where they go in and they change the whatever the thing is, the pattern of the what's that called?
The tumblers.
The tumblers, correct. And then they match the key to the tumblers, right?
Sure.
So why can't they make that unique? Why does that have to be the same as everybody else?
It's a manufacturing thing. I mean, it's just cheaper.
So curious. Like I just never seen such a kind of easy, suave way of being a car thief. I mean,
and he was
just
so methodical.
patience.
Did you see how he put each key? Because he was like four keys deep, and he would just put each key over. You know.
Yes. Now that's what got me. That's what made me think I have to know more about this film, because the film ends where it begins and begins where it ends. That I like. The same scene that happens at the beginning of the film happens at the end of the film. I like those kind of things. So it means that it's well constructed, or at least it's thought out for purpose. So I like that. I did think that my brain thinks weird things when I'm watching movies, you know, like I told you, my mom will count numbers, or she used to count numbers if you dialed the wrong number. You know, she was in a play once. I think I've told you this. He only dialed 6 numbers. I'm like, maybe it's a foreign number. Shh. Like, don't say that out loud. See, if I was an actor on stage and I heard that, I would go back to the phone and press the last number and then pick up the receiver just because. So when he does that in the beginning of the film and he finally gets the right key, then he kind of pulls out. You know what my brain was thinking? What happened to all those keys? Did they splatter all over the floor? You know, that's just where my brain goes. It's insignificant. And it means nothing to the movie, but it is something that goes through my brain.
Yeah, and just the fact that he was very calm with, like, you know, there's people walking by or whatever, and he's just kind of calmly key after key, and that's the whole deal with him, is he's just like super calm.
In the beginning of the film, when they do the interrogation, first of all, I wonder, is that traditionally how they used to do it? They used to line people up right in front of people. I mean, that seems weird. They established that, and whether or not it's truthful or not. Why were you carrying a gun? Well, because it's dark and Paris is not safe at night. So obviously there's some seediness to Paris. And so would you line a criminal up in front of somebody who's accusing him of something? It seemed odd. And why did all of that take forever? I mean, that whole sequence is long. It's very long. So what's the purpose? Why show us kind of insignificant stuff? Because it's so shocking when they get to him that they don't finger him?
I think that, first of all, he knows that he is one of the quote unquote usual suspects. That's why he has to go establish an alibi with his girlfriend. And that's why he has to have a place to be after he does that thing. And that's why he's around people and he's readily available to be picked up if, in fact, he gets picked up. So what was supposed to happen is he was supposed to get in, get out. Nobody saw him. But the way that the nightclub was set up is that there was really no back door. In fact, when he came downstairs, he was kind of shocked that he had to go by the coat check girl and found another way to get around her, because he was definitely not going to take off his coat, because I guess, number one, that's part of his look. And number two, it helps to kind of mask any other features of him, because he's just like all one thing. He's just this big guy in a coat. So anybody could be a guy in a coat. So all that being said, I think that he knew that there was a possibility, a good possibility, that he was going to get pulled in anyway. He just didn't know that there was going to be somebody who's going to be right in front of him, looking him directly in the eyes, and other people, and he didn't know he wasn't going to be able to like sneak in through the back. So all of that, he had to manage that in real time. And so I think that maybe it's to show that there's this built-in structure to how the bad guys interact with the good guys, how the cops, I'm sure not all of the people that they brought in were assassins, but all the people they brought in had probably been arrested at some point or had run afoul with the law at some point and were capable of doing something like this murder. at least in the eyes of the cops. So I don't know why it was so long. I don't necessarily have a reason unless it's more procedural. In Le Cercle Rouge, there's a scene in the middle of the film that's a break-in, and it seems like it's 45 minutes long. It's probably not. It's probably 20, but it's like in real time. And I think that what Melville was trying to do in that film is to show you how nerve-wracking something like that can be. If you flashy cut it where people are jumping and bouncing and moving, then it may not allow that kind of that dread to set in. And in this one, the whole time he's standing there, the whole time our main character is standing there, there's a good chance that he's going to get pointed out by the person who was right in front of him. So maybe Melville's trying to stretch that out and get us to feel that tension for as long as possible.
And the other thing I thought about with that scene is that there's, what does he collect, 400 people or whatever he says? Like collect 100 people from each district or
like
whatever he says.
20 people from every precinct or whatever. It's
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it was like 400 people, and they're all standing in line, and the first three, not even including the real suspect, take forever. And I'm thinking to myself, how long is this process? I mean, did they do that for all of those people? I guess that's supposed to show us that the chief of police or commissioner, whoever he is to show that he's going to find out who the murderer is. Now, that club is associated with the underworld of Paris, so that's where they knew to go look for suspects. Okay, well, I got that. I got all that. I just thought it was, I was trying to figure out what it was, and then about an hour later, I went, I don't think that was about anything. I just think he was showing us in real time how long that would take. And I think you're right that the tension is built up, that he's standing right there, but they don't really make a big deal about it, nor does she ever look at him.
What if you had gotten a little bit more time with the main character? Do you feel like you might have felt that tension a little bit more? It seems like a lot of the stuff you're talking about is there you felt a disconnect from the main character, like, and that's a big deal. And so if you would have been like, you weren't worried for him. So were you not worried for him because you just knew he wasn't going to get arrested and sit in jail for the rest of the movie because that would be a boring movie? Or were you not worried for him because you didn't have a connection with him, and like an emotional connection with him?
Well, that's why I don't feel bad about asking questions about stuff that I don't understand. We've talked about this a million times with art history. There's stuff I just don't understand, but I'm taught the history, and then I understand why it's a relevant piece of artwork. That makes sense to me because you've explained to me its historical value, the reason why it's significant to this. It's influenced this, like you were saying, it's influenced Wes Anderson. So no, it's not that I didn't feel, I was worried for him. I was connected to him, and it's not that I was disconnected from him. I think the length of time that it took to get to him made me start thinking about other things versus worry for him. I don't think that necessarily is a disconnect with the character, because I was intrigued from the very beginning. I think it's very intriguing when you open a shot of a movie and you don't even know there's somebody there, you know, because I keyed in very quickly, but I read a bunch of things about how most people don't notice him there until he lights his cigarette. Which, man, smoking back in the day was the thing, wasn't it? People are bartending, smoking.
People are still smoking in France.
Oh my gosh, they're sitting in bed smoking, playing the piano smoking, reading books smoking. I mean, they're always smoking, or they're stopping what they're doing to light a cigarette. Because doesn't the guy who comes in to put the bug in their room, doesn't he stop and light a cigarette? I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a priority, dude. I don't think he does, but he should. So no, I don't think it's a disconnect with the character. It just, my mind maybe has a 2021 sensibility. You know, I've been alive for 5+ decades, and my mind and my thoughts about movies have been formed in a certain way. So it could be an expectation thing. And sometimes when beginning of films, it happens to me a lot with plays. It takes about 10 minutes to adjust to the rhythm of the play. It's not that the first 10 minutes sucked or the actors were bad. It just takes a little bit. And then once it clicks, it clicks. So maybe I was too much in my mind. You know, maybe I was thinking too much. In defense of what I said earlier about, we have seen a lot of movies where a lot of things are happening all the time in those movies. So maybe it's a a frame of mind. I've been watching 30-minute episodes of a show called Feel Good. Mae Martin, a comedian, very good show. And they're 30 minutes long, and a lot of things happen in that 30 minutes. And you're in, you're out. I'm used to Netflix. So maybe my disposition and my attitude about pacing and rhythm needs to readjust. And maybe it was a good thing that he does take the time in that scene so my mind can readjust to it. So I don't necessarily think I was disconnected to the character. I just think I might have been pondering the wrong questions.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, I wanted to talk about the last scene. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about before we talk about the end of the film?
No, I'm dying to talk about the end of the film.
Yeah. No. So I liked it. I thought it was really cool because just the way that you're right. He starts off going to this club at the beginning of the film, and then he ends the film going to this club, and everything that he didn't do at the beginning of the film, he does at the end of the film.
And the garage too.
Yeah, and the garage. Yeah,
the barking dog.
Oh,
There's I key on dogs barking. It's a thing I have. There's a barking dog when the car is coming down that alleyway.
Yeah,
and he does that wide turn. As soon as he does that wide turn, and it barks almost all the way to the middle of that first scene of them in the garage, and then at the end, as soon as he makes that wide turn again, the dog starts barking, but it doesn't bark all the way through the end of the scene.
But once he gets to the club, first time he purposefully goes around the coat check into the men's bathroom, but the second time he goes to the coat check specifically and does check did you check his hat, I guess?
He checks his hat.
His hat, that's what I thought.
But he leaves the ticket.
But he leaves the ticket, which is like, that's good. I like that.
So is that like a promising young woman thing where she throws the license into the woods? She knows what her destiny is? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He's like, why do I need this ticket? I'm going to get killed. And just the fact that he goes and as he walks up to her, I mean, the whole thing, like the whole feeling is she knows what he looks like when he's about to kill somebody. And he knows that he's being followed. He knows that he's being keyed in on, and he wants to send a message to her after he's dead, much like Promising Young Woman, except Jean-Pierre Melville didn't have delayed text messages. So he had to use an empty gun. So that's the really cool part to me is how you're able to do all of these nonverbal messages from a character who's nonverbal to get his point across to the audience, to get his point across to the piano player, to get his point across to the cops, like to let everybody understand that he's in an untenable situation and that he's going to do the only thing that he thinks is going to get the people that he does care about, get them out and kind of like thumb his nose at the cops too. So I don't know.
So why does he even bother? Why doesn't he just get out of town? Because they spend a lot of time on those subway scenes, and it's obvious he can get away from them, which is very cool because you see how the old subways used to work with the lights and stuff like that. That's cool. Which is kind of still similar.
Those lights that was specifically to track him.
Yeah,
those
I know.
People turning those on and off. Oh,
yeah,
okay. All right. Okay.
I mean, you see that lady who's pretending to get her handkerchief out of. Yeah, right. Come on.
And somehow he knows like who all the plants are. That's the part that's just like, really?
Everybody knew. Everybody knows. As soon as you see the lady with the go-go boots who actually follows him, you're like, yeah, she's a plant too. I don't think Melville is trying to stump his audience. I think he wants you in on it. And so he makes it as obvious as it is for this guy to figure it out. So they spend all that time with the subway. It's very well done. And he gets away from him every time. And then ends up going back to his apartment. I just thought, okay, you could just like post somebody outside.
Yeah, he's in a position where he can't really, he obviously can't live where he's going to live permanently because he knows more about the situation. He knows who wanted the club owner killed, and he can tell that to the cops, and the cops know that he has connections to the mob. So he's wanted by both sides. I mean, it's kind of like True Romance or any one of those movies where it's like, hey, I've got two bad factions against me. him dying and the cops killing him was kind of like, the cops can say that he's the one who killed the club owner, and the people who wanted him to kill the club owner are now absolved of any kind of worry that he's going to rat on them. So,
but he had $4 million. It wasn't 4 million, whatever the French equivalent is. Francs. I don't know how much that is in francs, but he had a significant amount of money because that guy gave him 2 million each. And then, of course, that guy does not fare well, but he could have just left the country. Why did he go back to her? What purpose does it serve to pretend you're going to kill somebody? Although it is a very cool twist at the end.
It's death by cop. He wanted the undercover cops that were in the club to kill him. And the only way they could do that is for him to threaten someone's life, which he did with an empty gun. So he told her essentially that I didn't want to kill you, but he gave the cops the capability to kill him because he was threatening someone's life.
So obviously he's the bird in the cage. And this is his way out of the cage. Yes. And this whole entire movie is him being warned by whatever he's being warned by and throwing himself up against the cage and getting rattled and losing his feathers and all that other stuff. Okay. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. Clever. I don't mean to sound like that sounded sarcastic. I don't want to sound sarcastic.
Yeah, it is. Melville, big deal.
I got it. Art. Who cares? No, it is very clever. I mean, it is very clever. It is a new experience. This film was a new experience for me on some level. Most French films that I know are in the last 20 years. And they're always, and we talked about this with Elle, and we've talked about it with a couple other French films. Yeah, Diabolique, Amour. There's all these textures to it. There's like subplot over subplot over subplot, and all these things are going on, and they're very intricate, almost to the point where if you take one of the subplots out, I think I said this exact same thing on the Elle podcast. If you take one of the subplots out, you won't lose the rest of the narrative. You just won't. And I love that. I think add as much as you can. That's going to make the narrative much more interesting, because life is not just two people, one in a really cool hat and one playing a piano. Very cool. It's just not that way. It's complicated. Life is complicated. So it's nice. It seems like this is a stripped down version of a gangster film. That's the way to put it. That's what it is. It's like everything else that happens in between American gangster films. Everything that happens between the lines of American gangster films. We see all of the other drug use and hookers and prostitutes and deaths and beating somebody and stabbing somebody in the back of somebody's trunk. We see all of that in American films. This is what happens in between that.
Yeah. It's funny because you can tell that Melville watched a bunch of like 30s and 40s Hollywood gangster movies, like pre-code stuff, and was like, yeah, you know what? I like those trench coats. I like those hats. I like those cool guys doing shady stuff. And he just was making his own versions of that and taking what he wanted and what he liked and repurposing it to tell his story. And I'm sure the same way that people who watched Le Samourai decided to do the same thing. Refn's like, I don't want my character to talk a bunch. I just want him to just look at stuff and look at people and maybe smirk every once in a while. And it works, when Ryan Gosling does that in Drive. And same thing with Wes Anderson, same thing with, I'm sure that Fincher and Scorsese. And I mean, I saw some things comparing the character to Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver, not in a direct comparison, but just kind of like a loner, someone who's in their own kind of cage but still has to interact with society in a certain way. And so, yeah, I mean, you can pull from that, and that Martin Scorsese has seen this film. That he's probably seen all of Melville's films and watched them in the theater.
See, now that is a wish list thing right there. Okay, I just put it on my bucket list. Sit here and watch a Melville film with Scorsese and let him tell me what I need to know, because he would be the one to go, blah, 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 and that has blah, 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 and that has blah, 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 blah. And I would be like, whoa, because he did that with The Bicycle Thief or Thieves. He started talking about that film, and I was like, wait, stop. No, I don't want to listen because I want to see the movie first. And I've never gone back to hear what he had to say about it, but it did intrigue me enough we ended up watching that for a podcast.
We did. Yep. No, it's great.
Tim Burton does a lot of those shots of the guys in trench coats, and especially in Batman, in the first Batman, where they're straight on looking and they're shooting directly at each other from across the room and never hitting each other. In the Axis chemical plant, all of those shots remind me of a lot of what was going on in this film too.
It's very noir. Yeah. Yeah. It's the whole, Dick Tracy noir style type of a thing. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. You can tweet us at actorengineer, and we're on YouTube. Just search for the Actor and the Engineer podcast, and we'll see you next time.